Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and as you can see, I'm still on the road. It's Sunday, March 10th. I'm heading back to my home state of Virginia from the Illinois Libertarian Party debate and the Michigan Libertarian Party debate. I've already done 2 post-debate commentaries. I'd invite you to listen to those. I'm whiling away my time today on the road, giving political commentaries, world-famous political commentaries, of course. But I haven't given you my analysis of something, pretty significant, and that is the Super Tuesday results. And I want to do that in this commentary. We participated in 3 presidential primaries. The Libertarian Party presidential candidates did: Oklahoma, Massachusetts, and North Carolina. So I want to talk about those results, and let me begin first by just putting things in a context here. I think, as everyone knows by now, my quest in this campaign is to move our party in a totally different direction from what we've been moving in. And that's really the essence of my campaign. That it's tempting for outsiders to think that, we're all on the same page as libertarians, but nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we're on totally different pages, on different positions and different visions we have for the party. And I am totally opposed to the message that this party's been putting out for 20 years now. The message of continuing socialism through Social Security and Medicare and other socialist programs, school vouchers, immigration controls. I think this is a super bad message. Not only because it's not freedom, because freedom entails the dismantling of infringements on freedom, but because there's no constituency out there for this message. I mean, we're now down to 0% in the polls. That's down from 1.1% of 3 years ago. We're going in the bad direction here. And that's not surprising, because there is no constituency for this message out there among the electorate. So I want to move our party back in the direction of our original founding principles of freedom, free markets, and voluntary charity. So that means necessarily rejecting socialism in all its variations, which means the immediate dismantling of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, immigration control, school vouchers, public schooling, making the case for separating school and state, okay? Which is a totally different direction from what we've been running in our presidential campaigns. Totally different direction in what my honorable opponents are standing for in this race. Immigration controls, or school vouchers, whether it's Social Security privatization, as it's called, or health savings accounts, and direct medical care, but keep Medicare intact. I want to move our party back to the founding principles of freedom, free markets, and voluntary charity. So let me turn to the Oklahoma primary. In that primary, there was only 2 of us. I don't know why the other presidential candidates were not in that race, but it was just Chase Oliver and me. And from what I can tell, as I'm going from state convention to state convention, I'm connecting with, I think, and this is just instinctively thinking, that with about 20% of the attendees, with this idea of just moving our party in a totally different direction. Don't go with the flow anymore that we've been going with for 20 years. The 80%, I'm sensing, no, Jacob, we're going to keep going with the flow, and we're going to hope for a different result. But 20% is good. I mean, if you're trying to shift the direction of an entity, an organization, or a company, if you start out with a base of 20% that's agreeing with you, that's a big base to start from. And then you try to, expand that base, and you hope that, the people in the 20% are passionate and committed to saying, we do need to move this organization in a different direction. So they talk to others, and that ultimately brings a paradigm shift. So, after each debate, I have people coming up and saying, Jacob, you've opened up my eyes on the importance of principle. You're absolutely right. What we've been doing is just clearly not working. We need to move this party in the direction of principle. And then one person came up to me recently after the debate and said, Jacob, I've been a proponent of immigration controls all my life. As a result of this debate, you have opened up my eyes. I am now a proponent of open borders, and I'm not going back. Well, this is very heartening. It shows you the power of ideas on liberty and how you can influence people through argumentation and debate. And that's what I'm trying to do, is shift the direction of this party. So 20% is a good solid base to do that. So going into the Oklahoma primary, it's just Chase Oliver and me. Now, like I say, it's tempting to think that libertarians are on the same page because we're all libertarians, but nothing could be further from the truth. And the stark example of this is Chase Oliver and me. I mean, Chase is one of the best exponents of this message of welfare, warfare, state reform that you'll ever find in this party. And if you go back, for example, to the South Carolina debate, Chase is actually the most vociferous defender of continuing Social Security in that debate. I mean, he's just clear that we've got to continue this program for the next generation, which is 25 years. He has an opt-out plan where he says he's going to let young people opt out. But if you're going to continue Social Security for everybody that stays in for at least one generation, you got to keep paying for that, and that means income taxation on the very people that you're letting opt out, or supposedly letting opt out. They got to keep paying to fund the Social Security payments for the other people. And so it's like, well, you get to opt out, but you don't really get to opt out because you got to keep paying the taxes to fund this thing. And we also know what's going to happen, 25 years from now. The 40-year-olds of today who will most likely stay in the socialist system will say, wait a minute, you can't cut us off. We're going to die in the streets. And so it'll be extended another 25 years. And so this 25-year plan is really a plan to continue socialism into perpetuity. And it's the same with Medicare, that Chase doesn't call for the elimination of Medicare and Medicaid. He calls for reform. He wants something called direct medical care or health savings accounts or some other reform that leaves this socialist system intact. And it was these two socialist programs, Medicare and Medicaid, that really destroyed what had been the finest healthcare system in history. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up in what the Census Bureau said was the poorest city in the United States, Laredo, Texas. And doctors' offices were filled with people, most of whom they knew couldn't pay the bill. Many of them were from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and doctors never turned away anybody. They handled them for free. And doctors were still the second wealthiest people in town, second only to the oil people. They were making money for the people who could pay, but they would pay back to the community in terms of helping the poor. The same we had one hospital in town, which was a Catholic hospital, Mercy Hospital. They relied on donations primarily. This is what genuine care and compassion is, not the coercive apparatus of the Medicare institution, as well as the income tax, the IRS, that is backing this whole system with the collection of taxes through the initiation of force. So Chase and I are on totally different wavelengths on this. He's going with the flow that has been established in this party over the 20 years, which is obviously the prevailing flow. There's no question about it. I mean, I'm not naive. I know what I'm up against here. And when I go to these state conventions, I figure, well, okay, I'm connecting with about 20% of the attendees, which is good for me. I mean, this is a base to work off of. So when we went into the Oklahoma thing, I was just assuming that it would be about 80-20, which is fine because 20% is a good base when you're trying to bring a paradigm shift in an entity, or an organization, or a political party, even in a nation. I mean, that's what we're trying to do in America. We're trying to shift America toward liberty, and if there's a 20% base out there that we're working off of, that's very encouraging. That's a large base. So I was figuring about 80-20, which I would have been happy with to build off of. Well, Chase wins the race. That didn't surprise me at all, because that is the prevailing trend in the party. It still is. Let's keep doing the same thing we've been doing for 20 years. And so I get 40% of the vote, around there, maybe 39 something, rounded off to 40. This was very encouraging for me. I'm stunned. I mean, because everybody knows by now what I'm trying to do. I mean, I'm swimming upstream like a salmon, going against the trend, saying we got to stop doing what we're doing. We need to move this party in a different direction. Here is 40% of the libertarians voting saying, we agree with this guy. Now, they're not voting for me. They're voting for what I'm saying. They're saying, Jacob, you're right. What we've been doing is just not working. We're at 0% in the polls. Zero. That's down from 1.1% three years ago. we're moving in the bad direction because there is no constituency for this message. And this is what a lot of my opponents in this race, and I think including Chase, just they don't realize that the problem is that this message is popular in the Republican Party, and who they target for votes. But Republicans are never going to cross party lines and vote for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. And so Chase believes in immigration controls, for example. I mean, well, the idea is, those right-wing proponents of immigration controls are going to flood us with votes. No, because they're all going to vote for Trump. So it's 0 votes for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate that supports immigration controls. Even one that wants to streamline the system and wants more immigrants in, like Chase, 0 votes, because they're all going to vote for Trump. So I was very heartened with this result of 40%. I want to thank you guys for this, because I was really expecting about 20. This tells me that there very well may be a shift occurring in this party, and I think some of my opponents may be sensing that shift. Because if we go to North Carolina, Chase again comes out first, no surprise there. And I don't think there's very many people that are better exponents of this message than this reform-oriented message than Chase. He's very eloquent, very passionate, gets very excited about it, and I have the utmost respect for him. But just I'm sure he does for me. It's just that we're on totally opposite wavelengths when it comes to what we need as a message for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. And so in North Carolina, I come in second. Okay, well, technically not second. There was a guy that called himself Time Traveler, and I have no idea who he is. I assume he's from this time period, though, but he's not a serious candidate. He's not one of the recognized presidential candidates. He actually came in second, but if you eliminate him, I come out second of all the other candidates in this race, which was a stunner for me. I mean, I thought, sure, I'd get 4th or 5th, again, this 20% base. Here I am second place if you eliminate Time Traveler. And I'm like stunned by this pleasantly, and I want to thank you all for doing this, because I've been giving speeches to libertarians in North Carolina for many years now. They know where I stand. I stand against this message that we've been putting out for 20 years now. And I totally disagree with Chase and the other candidates that keep supporting immigration reform and Social Security reform and these other monetary reform and reform. Every libertarian in North Carolina knows where I stand. I want to move this party in the direction of our founding principles of freedom, free markets, and voluntary charity. And so to come in second is incredible, because that means there very well may be taking place a significant shift, a paradigm shift here. Now, let me explain in a very real world context. Well, first of all, let me go over to Massachusetts. I want to thank you all in North Carolina for that vote return, because it was very, very heartening for me. Now, Massachusetts has not reported their statewide results, so nobody knows them yet, but my campaign manager found 8 pages on the internet that gave of tiny little towns that gave their results. And they're so small that they're really not a representative sample, but I want to share them with you because, again, they're very encouraging, and I want to thank y'all that voted in these small towns. Out of the 8 towns, 4 of the towns I win first place. It's just like shocking to me. And then in 2 of the towns I come in second, and then the other 2 towns I tie for second. And then in the overall vote totals of these 8 towns I win. I mean, this is an absolute shocker for me. I'm expecting like 4th or 5th. And okay, it's a small representative sample, and in the overall vote totals I come in first in these 8 little towns. Again, it's not an accurate representative sample, but it's a sign that there's people in this party that are saying what we've been doing is not working. Hornberger's right. We need to move this party in a totally different direction. So it's very encouraging, and I want to thank you all in these 8 little towns that, if I were to drive it, I could read the towns, but it's very heartening. Now, let me show you why this matters in a very real-world context. Okay, so Chase gets into the debate with Senator Raphael Warnock in a race for U.S. Senate about 1.5 years ago, with the same message that Chase is carrying forth today in this campaign. It hasn't changed at all. We'll continue Social Security for the next generation, opt-out plan, continue Medicare and Medicaid, just reform the healthcare system with health savings accounts or direct medical care or whatever. School vouchers, he's one of the premier exponents of school vouchers, which I totally oppose because they violate the core principle of our philosophy, the non-aggression principle. They violate the pledge that we all take, and I think pledges matter. If you take a pledge, you ought to live up to that pledge. Well, school vouchers use taxation, the initiation of force, to take money from one person to give it to another person. I totally oppose this. And he's an exponent of FDA reform. I would abolish the FDA. I'd separate healthcare in the state entirely. He just wants to reform the system. He favors the immigration control system. He just wants the government to let in more immigrants. But he wants to keep that control where they can, tell you, we're going to move you into a room and we're going to search you and search your body cavities for drugs and turn over your laptops and your cell phones and give us your password, show us your papers, and this is not freedom. Okay, so he takes this message into a debate with Senator Raphael Warnock, who's an incumbent U.S. Senator. It was quite incredible. A sitting U.S. Senator agrees to debate a libertarian. When was the last time you saw that? It was pretty impressive. And Warnock treated Chase with the utmost respect, treated him like an equal. In fact, the moderators of that debate were totally unbiased. They treated Chase as an equal to Warnock. It was a fascinating thing to watch. And so Chase also gets around, 30, 40, $50 million of free advertising because the Georgia race was going to determine control over the Senate. Chase was the critical factor on whether Warnock and Herschel Walker would get into a runoff. So Chase got more publicity for his message than any libertarian candidate in history, including presidential candidates. CNN, ABC, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, Bloomberg, Rolling Stone, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, local press. Every single voter in Georgia knew exactly what Chase's message was because he was able to get his message out. You get free advertising for your message. That's as good as buying advertising. And then he gets into this debate, which is broadcast statewide, televised statewide. Everybody in Georgia was watching this debate. And so this debate really shows you the difference of what I'm talking about with where Chase stands and where I stand in terms of the message that we both believe should be carried forth in this presidential race. So in the middle of this debate, Chase gets 2 questions to ask Warnock. Okay, it's a great opportunity to let people know where we libertarians stand. It's a fantastic opportunity. So what would I have said? I would have said, Senator Warnock. Now Warnock's a Christian minister. He was the minister before he reached the Senate of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, which is, I think, the most renowned, famous black church in America. I could be wrong about that, but it certainly ranks in the top 3. And I would have said, Senator Warnock, as a Christian minister, how do you reconcile your support of Social Security and Medicare and other welfare state programs that rely on the initiation of force through the coercive taxing apparatus of the IRS, which is a vicious, malevolent, tyrannical agency, forcing people to supposedly be caring and compassionate, with the voluntary principles enunciated by Jesus Christ? When Jesus was approached by the young rich man and asked, what else can I do? And Jesus, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And the young rich man says, to heck with that, and he walks away. Jesus didn't call a Roman centurion over and say, hey, he won't give to the poor. Take his money and give it to the poor so we can all be good, caring, and compassionate. No, because that violates free will. Free will is that guy's got the right to say no. That's what freedom's all about. How do you reconcile this, Pastor Warnock or Senator Warnock? What would he have said? I don't know. I don't think you can reconcile it. But darn sure I would have communicated that question to every single person in Georgia that was watching this debate, which was most everybody. And they would have been sitting there struggling with it, saying, how am I going to answer that question? And that's how you bring a shift in society. You cause people to start struggling with these kind of fundamental principles of liberty and libertarianism. All right, so that's what I would have said. Now, Chase couldn't do that because Chase advocates the continuation of Social Security for at least one generation. He advocates the indefinite continuation of Medicare and Medicaid. He just wants to reform the system. He couldn't challenge Warnock at that fundamental level. So what was Chase's question? He said, Senator Warnock, are you reading the bills before you vote on them in Congress. Because you see, a major part of this debate, Chase said that he wanted to reform Congress. He wanted to reform the duopoly. He wanted to make the duopoly work. And that part of that is that if he were elected senator, he would read the bills. Okay, if you're interested in reforming Congress or making the duopoly work, that may be an important principle. I couldn't care less what they read the bills or not. I wouldn't even think along those lines. You're not going to reform these two parties, and it's not a freedom message. Now, every voter in Georgia that was watching this debate is saying, oh, libertarians believe in reforming Congress and reading the bills. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity that Chase has gone off in this direction of reforming Congress. Now, the second question, what would have been my second question, Warnock? I would have said, Senator Warnock, the war on drugs is the most racist government program since segregation. No question about it. Every black in this country knows that. Blacks get disproportionately higher jail sentences. They get stopped disproportionately more times. Asset forfeiture, there was more stealing of blacks on the highway. Will you join me right now and call for the total end of this destructive government program known as the war on drugs? Legalize all drugs. Will you join me in this? Now, what would he have said? Well, certainly he would have said, oh no, I can't go there. But at least everybody watching this would have known, wow, these libertarians are with us. That this is an oppressive government program that has landed disproportionately on blacks. They would have known, hey, we're with you guys. And that's part of the objective of bringing a shift in our country toward liberty. So what was Chase's second question, Warnock? He didn't ask Warnock a second question. Instead, he says, I want to ask Herschel Walker a question. And I'm sitting there, oh my God, Herschel Walker's not there. But he had a right to do it. So his question to Walker was, why are you scared to debate me? That's why you're not here. You're scared to debate me. Okay. So every voter in Georgia is now thinking, okay, libertarianism means not being afraid to debate, but it's not a substantive issue of freedom. And the rest of the debate, Chase calls for immigration reform. And they asked him about the FDA and FDA reform and healthcare reform and reform. I mean, Chase is one of the great advocates of school vouchers, educational reform. And so, we're just totally on different pages here. And so, but give credit where credit is due. Chase is one of the best exponents of this reform message in the party. There's no question about it. He's passionate, he's dedicated, he can make the case for school vouchers, he can make the case for continuing Social Security for the next generation. It's just a case that I totally and absolutely disagree with. To me, it's just a bad message for various reasons. One, it's not freedom. Freedom entails the dismantling of infringements on freedom. If all we do is just reform these programs or continue them for 25 years, it's not freedom. I'm not interested in a 25-year plan for freedom, not at my age. I want freedom now, which means making the case for dismantling infringements and making the case in a positive sense for what freedom is, the separation of school and state. It's not just abolishing the Department of Education, which all of my opponents favor. Ronald Reagan called for the abolition of the Department of Education. Big deal. We got to go further than that and show people why this institution of public schooling is so horrific, what it has done to destroy a real education in this country through their programs of regimentation and conformity and deference to authority and the destruction of the love of learning that takes place in these, what I call Army-light institutions. That's the case we need to make to our fellow Americans. And that's one of my biggest disagreements with this reform message. It's not freedom. Also, it can't garner votes. We know that from experience because there's no constituency. There's no big block of voters out there that are saying, oh, we can't wait to go vote for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate that's calling for reform of socialism. Is there a group out there that will vote for our principles? Yes, absolutely. That is my contention. That if you keep doing the same thing, okay, that's fine. But you're going to get the 0 to 1%. You're not going to do any better than that. We already know that from the polls. If people's sentiment hasn't changed toward the Libertarian Party in the last 3 years, it's not going to change over the next 6 or 7 months. But if we give people something they're not expecting, a campaign of total principle, now we got a shot. And that means open borders. We garner all the people the votes of people that are horrified by what's going on the border. Okay? That's a big block of voters out there. I'm convinced of it, that are horrified, but are just looking for leadership. And we can provide that leadership. This has been our position for more than 50 years, open borders. You go in there and you make the competent religious case, moral case, educational case, ethical case, moral case for open borders. Those are my voters, okay? Our voters in this party. I mean, we have led the way for open borders for more than 50 years. This is a great opportunity for us. We squander that opportunity by putting out a message that says we favor immigration controls. Okay? Now we just become like Republicans. We're just a variation of Republicans. And we got to lead America in the restoration of faith and freedom and voluntary charity. You can't do that by saying, well, if we dismantle these programs today, that there's going to be people dying in the streets. Nonsense. Freedom doesn't mean dying in the streets. America lived without socialism for more than 100 years. And there weren't people dying in the streets. On the contrary, there was the greatest outburst of economic prosperity and voluntary charity that mankind has ever seen. And so this is what I'm saying that we need to do in this party. Move this country. Give Americans what they're not expecting this time around. A campaign of pure principle, including open borders, dismantle Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, school vouchers, public schooling, healthcare central planning, drug war reform. We got to make the principal case for liberty. Separate money in the state, education in the state, healthcare in the state, economy in the state, dismantle the national security state, and into socialism. We do that, and I have absolutely no doubts that we will lead America to freedom. And that's our job in this party. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.